Today is Wednesday, January 10th. This is our first political update of 2024 here on from the Atlanta News First Digital First Desk. I'm Tim Darnell, joined by producer Maria Moreau. As I said, this is our first political update for 2024, what is sure to be a historic and exciting year for political news, as Georgia continues its place at the center of the nation's political attention. Here are today's headlines that we're watching for you today. Georgia lawmakers are back in session as we speak. They reconvened on Monday. Earlier today, Governor Brian Kemp outlined his 2024 legislative priorities. One of those issues is how lawmakers are deciding to spend the state's multi-billion-dollar budget surplus. Other headlines that were following a trial began yesterday, Tuesday, regarding Georgia's electronic voting machines. Governor Brian Kemp's office announced earlier this week the state is declining to participate in a federally funded school summer lunch program for low-income communities. And finally, the fallout continues from a series of explosive allegations regarding Fani Willis, Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade, and their role in prosecuting former President Donald Trump. But at the top of the hour, as I said, lawmakers have convened in Atlanta for the second year of the 2023-24 legislative session. Now, some bills have carried over from last year, and on top of that, Georgia is once again the center of the nation's political attention. Right off the bat, legislators are taking another look at sports betting. Now, last year, some state senators tried to push the bill through at the last minute to no avail. Also, with the Israeli-Hamas conflict continuing to rage in the Middle East, lawmakers are reconsidering what was introduced last year, House Bill 30, which would allow prosecutors to add anti-Semitism charges to crimes against Jewish people or places. Now, that bill just barely failed to pass in 2023, and that's an issue that we're continuing to follow. Also, we're continuing to follow what lawmakers are considering is a controversial school voucher program that would give parents of students in Georgia's lowest performing school districts a series of vouchers for private or homeschooling. That is a bill that's also been carried over from last year. And lawmakers will, of course, have plenty of new bills to consider as well, including a contentious proposal from Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, who will likely be a candidate for governor in 2026. He is proposing a plan that would give public school teachers a series of stipends or financial allowances to take firearms training and carry guns in the classroom. That will be a huge issue that will continue to follow in 2024 and beyond. Earlier today, on Wednesday morning, the annual Eggs and Issues breakfast was held at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in downtown Atlanta. Now, this is considered the biggest networking and of the event among businesses and political leaders in the state. The annual event is held the first week of every legislative session and is hosted by the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. Atlanta News First Rebecca Schramm was at this morning's event.
It was a who's who of business and political leaders, some 2,500 of them having breakfast together on the field. The Georgia Chamber of Commerce sponsors the Eggs and Issues breakfast each year, and they moved it here because it's gotten so popular.
Thank y'all very much. Good morning.
Laying out his agenda for this legislative session, Governor Brian Kemp said he's focused on reforms on frivolous lawsuits to help stabilize health care premiums. He's planning large investments in infrastructure to spur more business development, and he made a big announcement involving the university system, a plan to build a new dental school at Georgia Southern University and a new medical school at the University of Georgia.
With these new assets on the way, we will further address the growing need for healthcare professionals in our state and ensure that we are doing everything that we can to address the challenges across the healthcare spectrum.
Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones said his priorities include repealing government regulations and further exploring school choice vouchers. And House Speaker John Burns said he's focused on additional pay raises for state troopers, on election legislation like moving away from QR codes on ballots, and on saving taxpayers money.
We intend to increase the child deduction on state income tax from $3,000 to $4,000 and adjust the homestead exemption from $2,000 to $4,000 to bring even more tax relief to Georgia families.
As for the governor's plans, we expect to learn more about them tomorrow during his State of the State address at the state capitol. In downtown Atlanta, Rebecca Schramm, Atlanta News First.
Now, as Rebecca just mentioned, tomorrow Governor Kemp will deliver his annual State of the State address. The Eggs and Issues Breakfast and the State of the State address are two of the signature issues that lawmakers engage in every year during the first week of the legislative session. Now, there's another issue that lawmakers are considering this year, and that is how to spend the state's multi-billion-dollar budget surplus. Abby Kasuras has this report, but also she will tell you that Democrats and Republicans are praising the state's excellent economic standing and that there's a lot of good that can come from spending the state's budget surplus. But that's about all they can agree on. Here's her package.
With the swing of a gavel, Georgia lawmakers are back to work.
All members will please take their seat.
House Majority Leader Chuck Efstration saying Republicans are focused on kitchen table issues, education, taxpayer rebates, and fighting crime. He would like to use part of the $11 billion surplus to boost law enforcement pay.
Priority of our caucus is to make sure that all Georgians feel safe, particularly in their own homes.
In September, the Department of Public Safety Commissioner testified before the state's Public Safety Committee that more troopers are resigning. They have nearly half as many applications, making it impossible for them to reach their 1,000 trooper goal.
Our hardworking law enforcement officers who keep us safe every day are compensated appropriately, that we have a mindset toward respecting the work that they have to do and the need to make sure that they're paid as they should be.
While Republicans control the House, Minority Leader James Beverly feels he can get enough Republicans on their side to support the full expansion of Medicaid.
Medicaid being expanded would help rural areas, urban areas, because right now you're giving a lot of indigent care away. And so at least you get 86 cents on the dollar as opposed to zero.
The state opted for their own alternative to Medicaid, Georgia Pathways. The state estimated more than 300,000 Georgians would be eligible. As of November, the Department of Community Health reported less than 17,000 people submitted applications. Beverly wants more money to improve state services for low-income families.
We have a governor who disregarded, line item vetoed, so many different items that were necessary, lunches for kids. Give me a break.
That was our own Abby Kasuras at the state capitol reporting on how lawmakers are planning to spend the state's multi-billion-dollar budget surplus. Happening yesterday, or what began yesterday on Tuesday, January 9th, was a trial that is now underway regarding Georgia's electronic voting machines. Election integrity activists are asking a federal judge to order the state to stop using its current electronic voting system. Now, these opponents of the system say that the Dominion voting system program is vulnerable to attack and cyber attacks, and also has operational issues that could cost voters their right to cast a ballot and have it accurately reported and represented. The opponents of the system say the Dominion voting system's touch-screen machines are so flawed that they are in fact unconstitutional. While Georgia election officials, including Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, again another likely gubernatorial candidate in 2026, say that the system is reliable and secure. Earlier this week, Governor Brian Kemp's office announced that Georgia would not be participating in a summer federal food assistance program for children in low-income communities. Now, the Summer Food Service Program is a federal program administered by each state that participates. It reimburses states that serve no-cost meals and snacks to children in low-income communities throughout the summer months when school is not in session. But Governor Kemp's office said the federal program lacks basic nutritional requirements and also doesn't address the mission of improving children's health and overall wellness. Instead, the governor's office said Georgia will keep its current program that it said is far more effective and sufficient. That program, called the Seamless Summer Program, is administered by the State Department of Education. And finally, a story that continues to develop seemingly minute by minute and hour by hour. On Monday, a bombshell court filing in Fulton County Superior Court alleged that Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, who is prosecuting former President Donald Trump for alleged 2020 election interference, has had an improper relationship with the special prosecutor she hired to assist in that investigation. That individual's name is Nathan Wade, and Doug Reardon, our political reporter, has this update.
New allegations laid out in a brand new court filing are threatening the very existence of the historic Fulton County election indictment. Despite numerous attorneys with ample experience prosecuting RICO cases, the filing reads, Willis chose to appoint her boyfriend, who has little to no experience trying felony cases. That man is Nathan Wade, a private defense lawyer who, according to the Monday filing, was taking Willis on and paying for vacations across the world with Fulton County taxpayer dollars authorized by Willis herself. Wade was brought on as a special prosecutor in November 2021 to lead the grand jury investigations that eventually led to charges. Between then and December 2023, the Fulton County DA's office, according to the paperwork, paid him an estimated $1 million. All the while, the filing says, Willis and Wade traveled to Napa Valley, Florida, the Caribbean, and on several cruises together. Wade's contract as the special prosecutor began one day after he finalized a divorce in Cobb County.
It certainly is a huge problem if true, and I think that's important to emphasize, if true.
Anthony Kreis, a law professor at Georgia State, says what the motion is missing is concrete evidence.
I think they'll have to produce some kind of evidence. Mainly, I think we'll see evidence in the form of witness testimony, if anything.
Still, the news left former president and Georgia indictment defendant Donald Trump calling for the dismissal of the case altogether.
It's illegal. What you did is illegal. So we'll let the state handle.
So on Tuesday, actually late Monday evening, we learned that there were a new court filing in Donald Trump's historic Georgia indictment, actually dealing with one of the co-defendants, Michael Roman. And we are here with Chandel Summer, who is a veteran Georgia prosecutor, defense attorney. You know, you had some pointed comments that I was reading earlier on before we were able to talk today. What are the chances of this court filing with some, fairly salacious details and controversial details regarding Fulton County DA Fani Willis and her special prosecutor Nathan Wade. What are the chances of this actually blowing up and just blowing the entire indictment of Donald Trump and 18 others completely out of the water?
I think it has more potential to blow up the career of Fani Willis than it does to blow up the indictment of Donald Trump. These are salacious details, and it does indicate some poor judgment on her part that she would hire someone to be a special prosecutor on the case who really has very little experience in this type of criminal defense realm, or just this kind of RICO action. He was a prosecutor, but it's unclear as to what kind of cases he prosecuted. But in any event, they were having, according to the pleadings, some type of relationship, and it appears to have been a romantic relationship. They have apparently been able to capture some cruise receipts where she went on Caribbean cruises with Nathan Wade. So I think it just shows poor judgment that she would be involved romantically with someone who she's working on the case with. But more importantly, the idea that the Fulton County is paying a special prosecutor in this situation and has paid him over $1 million, and she's benefited to a certain extent from the fact that he's been able to make so much money on this case. I mean, that's a tremendous amount of money to make as a prosecutor. She doesn't make $1 million a year. She makes probably 150,000 tops. The Supreme Court justices of Georgia make $186,000 a year. So for a private attorney to come in and bill up $1 million on this case is extraordinary.
But don't locally elected district attorneys have the ability to hire whoever they want?
They do. And he could be on the payroll, no question about it. And she could be involved in a relationship with someone who's on the payroll. The problem is that this is not someone on the Fulton County payroll. This is a special prosecutor, and district attorneys do have the right to hire special prosecutors, but it usually occurs in cases where there's a conflict of interest, like the district attorney is prosecuting their best friend's child or something like that. So they'll bring in a special prosecutor. It's fairly rare, but in this case, she appears to have allowed Mr. Wade to come into this case as a special prosecutor because of the enormity of the task. That her office was not equipped to handle this type of a case. Another issue is where she got the money to pay him with. You know, I have a vivid recollection of DA Willis going to the Georgia legislature a couple of years ago and saying that because of COVID, they had a huge backlog and she needed $5 million to hire new prosecutors and new people to process all of the backlog of cases she had. But she didn't use that money for doing that. That's why there's probably still a huge backlog of cases in Fulton County. Instead, she used it to prosecute Donald Trump. And she's been paying Mr. Wade from those funds that she obtained for the COVID purposes.
And we've done here in Atlanta News First and our award-winning investigative team a series of articles on the backlog of cases at the Fulton County Jail, the atrocious conditions. And you're right, the court filing did say that the money that was used to reimburse Mr. Wade allegedly came from COVID funds that the DA had requested to help clear the backlog, and yet there's still just a tremendous backlog of cases at the Fulton County DA's office. In terms of Fani Willis's career, you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, it has more potential to damage her career than her overall indictment. Doesn't her office and her integrity come into question, and isn't that a potential tool that former President Trump can use to continue his battle to have all of these indictments against him dismissed?
I don't think it's going to make any difference in terms of whether or not the indictment is dismissed or whether or not there's no, unless they're going to accuse her of some specific prosecutorial misconduct, then that's related to the case and not necessarily to her personal life. I don't think it will affect this case. I haven't seen anything or heard anything. And of course, I've read the same news reports you have, but I haven't seen anything. I've actually read the motion, which is 127 pages. So it's quite lengthy. I didn't see anything that suggests prosecutorial misconduct. If she had hidden evidence or if she had tried to influence a witness to lie or something like that, that might be something that would bring the whole case into jeopardy because she had done something nefarious. But having an affair, if that's what it is, with the person you hire to try the case does not necessarily sound to me like prosecutorial misconduct. It sounds like poor judgment, and it sounds like a political problem.
And let's talk about wrapping up our conversation with Shandell Summer, who is a longtime Georgia defense attorney and has also prosecuted cases. You've been on both sides of the aisle. Let's talk about the political ramifications. The former president is going to just have to use these type of allegations in his public relations and political campaign. I mean, how do you see him scoring political points with these type of salacious allegations?
Well, I thought the interesting point that was made by these motions is the fact that they were made by Michael Roman, a basically unknown defendant in this case. I had to look him up to see what he did. And the other thing that I think was interesting is that one of the big issues in this case is the fact that Nathan Wade was never officially sworn in as a special prosecutor and was signing papers as a special prosecutor and doing things in the case under the auspices of being a special prosecutor, but they had not formally made him the special prosecutor. So earlier in the litigation, there were motions filed to have the indictment thrown out because of the fact that he had improperly signed it before his oath had been given. So now those motions seem to have a little more to them since all of this has come up. The idea that they're prosecuting this man, Michael Roman, because he apparently came up with a plan to have people sign documents saying they were electors when they really weren't, but yet the district attorney's office has a special prosecutor who's going around acting like he's the special prosecutor when technically he wasn't because he hadn't signed his oath. I think there's a lot of hypocrisy there. It's kind of like what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So is he going to be prosecuted? Is Nathan Wade going to be prosecuted for holding himself out as a prosecutor when he really wasn't? And then the other issue is whether or not she benefited from payments that were made to him. And if she did, then there is a federal statute that is 18 USC 1346 when a public officer personally benefits from an undisclosed conflict of interest, they can be prosecuted. And if they find multiple events, it could be a RICO case. So it gets, the plot is thickening. I'll put it like that. Do I think Donald Trump will be able to use this? I'm sure he is going to use this. And the fact that they had Michael Roman bring the motion as opposed to Steve Sadow or one of the higher profile defendants, I thought was interesting. I think it's almost like floating a trial balloon, and then they'll all join in if it's successful. The other thing is that I believe that they are going to use this when they go to the Georgia legislature to redo the statutes on prosecutors and control over prosecutors by the legislature or by a panel. that will determine whether or not prosecutors can be removed. So I think that's kind of the political bang that they'll get for their buck here.
Well, House Speaker John Burns on Tuesday afternoon on social media said he found the allegations against DA Willis troubling, but he also used it as a way to promote, as you said, and I believe you're referring to the Prosecuting Attorney Oversight Council that was passed last year, but really has not been able to implement its duties because of rules and regulation requirements. Do you think we're going to see a renewed effort to really put some teeth behind this proposed Prosecuting Attorney Oversight Council?
Yes, the Supreme Court struck down that law. Georgia Supreme Court struck that law down. So I think there'll be a renewed effort. They've already said in the legislature they're going to try it again and do it differently so that it passes constitutional muster. And I think this certainly provides the motivation for that. And like I said, I'm just shocked by the poor judgment on her part to be involved with somebody for whom the county is paying enormous amounts of money. I thought all along, it's funny how I've been following this case for so long now that some of the things I thought in the beginning are kind of coming to fruition. One of the things I thought was that they were spending an enormous amount of taxpayer money on special prosecutors, that was unnecessary. She has a huge staff and she probably could do the work herself. But that, along with the fact that the whole issue of official acts and whether he was acting whether Trump was acting in his official capacity, I felt like when I first started following this case, I was sort of the Lone Ranger alleging that was within his official capacity. And now that seems to be the basis of the whole double jeopardy argument. So you follow it long enough, you really can see that the way this thing is kind of winding, the long and winding road. But I don't think the case will ever be tried. I don't believe it's ever.
Yeah, I remember you saying that in one of our first conversations. I asked you if you thought Donald Trump would ever see the inside of a Fulton County courtroom, and your adamant opinion was you don't believe this will ever come before Judge Scott McAfee.
No, because I think the other cases have the likelihood of going forward, and if he's convicted, I don't think there'll be this bloodthirsty interest in prosecuting him on the state level and the federal level, and let's just keep going and keep going. I think the public will pretty much say, forget it at this point. And then there's also the possibility that Biden could pardon, if Biden is reelected, for example, that he could pardon Trump and then it'd be all done. And I don't know how that affects the Georgia case necessarily, because I don't think the president can pardon someone from a state crime. But I think this puts her reelection chances at risk, and she's up for reelection in 2024. So some enterprising young lawyer may think this is their opportunity to exploit the situation and go forward. And you could get a group of people who want to see this case go away, along with people who are angry with her about the misuse of public funds, put together a coalition, and this could be her first and last term as district attorney.
Yet another election we're going to be following here in 2024. Thanks to Shandell Summer, Gainesville, Georgia, Summer Law Firm. More than 30 years experience prosecuting and defending on both sides of the courtroom. Thanks to her for joining us, and thanks to all of you for watching this very first 2024 edition of Political Update here on Atlanta News First.